conflict sometimes defined as just as differing wants. And in that push and pull is where the tension is. That's why we have to be intentional and then not mind the conflict, but rather how do we manage the conflict?
You're tuning into the Journey to Your Best Self podcast, where we explore the past holistic well-being, personal growth, and living a fulfilling life. Each episode, we bring you insightful conversations, practical tools, and inspiring stories to help you integrate your mind, body, and spirit on your journey to becoming your best self. Let's dive in and embark on this journey together. All right, welcome back to Journey to Your Best Self podcast. As always, I'm your host, Brian O'Neill. I'm joined by my wonderful co-host, Tara O'Neill, a clinical hypnotherapist, life coach, and yoga instructor. Together, we are here to guide you on the path to a more balanced and fulfilling life. Today, we have the absolute pleasure of speaking with Aurelius Higgs, a communication coach who specializes in helping parents connect with their preteens through those crucial formative years. With a diverse multicultural background and over a decade and a half of international experience, Marcus has developed unique insights into cross-cultural communication and parenting. He's on a mission to mend parent-child relationships around the globe with his innovative show-up framework, which emphasizes the importance of identity, collaboration, and open communication. Marcus, we're thrilled to have you and to learn from you over the next hour or so. Welcome aboard.
Hey, Brian. Thank you for that introduction. And to teach is to learn twice. So I'm looking forward to learn from you as well and sit at your feet and
I feel
Tara's
like
feet.
There's going to be so many insights that you give, and to teach is to learn twice is an excellent one. So that's a great start.
As an educator, I got a few of those in my pocket.
I happen to, in a previous life and in a current life, I guess you might say, be an educator as well. So when I had seen English teacher, I had definitely a connection there. We have our own click. We can kind of sense each other out, no matter the district, the state, the country. We all have that bond. And in an even further life, someone else on this podcast also had a connection with teaching. So it's a good group we have here today.
Absolutely. Yeah. It starts with the young mind.
So to give us a little baseline and a starting point and something that we can kind of fall back to and connect the dots as the focal point of this conversation, can you give us a little bit of background of the show up framework? What was its genesis? What it's doing now, and what are your plans for it in the future?
Yeah, beautiful. So I am a communication coach for parents of preteens, and communication comes from my background in journalism. I got that done in Oakwood University in Huntsville, Alabama, before going off to South Korea as a missionary teacher. And I say my experience grew in the divine. I didn't necessarily change my world beliefs, but my beliefs shifted, let's say. And I continued on teaching in Saudi Arabia, Spain, and Thailand. And the show up framework came when I came back home to the Bahamas. This is where I grew up. And I was going into coaching, life coaching. I'm a heroic coach. The organization is called Heroic. And while I was working with some parents, because Mr. Rogers said, if you want to help the kids, you support the parents. And that's why I chose to work with the parents, because these are the same conversations I was having inside my parent-teacher meetings. And entrepreneurs and business people were like, I want to show up for my kid. And show up kept on ringing and resonating. And these are the same principles that I would teach inside the class. These are 21st century, they would call them soft skills or so on. But it's identity. It starts with a strong identity. Then it's collaboration, communication, critical thinking, and then creativity. And really that's what the show up framework is. And I think that's what we're going to need going into the age of AI. We're still a lot of people don't know who they are. And this goes back to ancient wisdom. know thyself and you'll understand the secrets of gods and men. We're losing a lot of introspection, and this is what I feel uniquely called to bring to the world, considering I do have my international experience, but I also am a third culture kid. My mother's from the Philippines. My dad's from the Bahamas. I was born in California. And knowing myself and having a strong identity is what I felt kept me in life and my well-being, my mental well-being, my relationships on the outside and on the inside. So that's a bit of a mix of all of it.
Yeah, the question was broad and complex, and you definitely tied a lot of it together. So many directions to go there. Do you think that knowing yourself helped you to navigate between different countries, different continents, different cultures so effortlessly? It seems like, just the Bahamas to Alabama, that's probably the shortest trip, but that in a way is completely different, right? And then you're in Asia, the Middle East, right? And then back again to North America. So what was the secret there for you being able to be successful in so many different places?
So 2 words there stood out to me when you said the secret there, and then where you said it was effortless. It was not without effort. That's a double negative, so it just means it was effortful.
I love it, yeah.
But to go to Shakespeare, that's where the rub is. It is through effort that is what revealed my character.
Okay.
And that's what I believe, like everything that eventually grows must first break. And it's when we go through that resistance that we understand ourselves. When you're dealing with other cultures, there is misunderstanding. It's when you understand yourself and who you are and where your foundation that it shakes you, but then it also reaffirms you to say, okay, yeah, what do you believe? And I think that's what the human experience is. Life is asking us, who are you? And then we're stumbling forward in it, and we say, oh yeah, we're like these people. Oh no, we're not like these people. And then you say, well, who are you? Life is asking, who are you? And figuring out who we are as separate individuals as well as contributors to the whole. And I think therein lies the beauty of life. That's how the mind forms. It breaks apart, and then it comes back together. This is from Dan Siegel when he talks about how the brain develops is the same way how the community develops. And we're not all blended together, but rather it's fruit salad. You're a cantaloupe, I'm a strawberry, you're a watermelon. So we're all separate, but we make this salad together.
Absolutely.
Excellent.
I'm a big fan of Dan Siegel and attachment theory. Have you explored that? I'm assuming, right? So
very much so.
Is that too much to dive into? Can you talk about how it starts, like, from conception practically, right? So that attachment, those primal potential injuries or wounds, and that there's hope, right? That we can recover from this once we start to understand and become aware of it.
It's interesting, and I'm gonna have some nuanced takes on it. And please, I invite questions, curiosity.
Yeah, no, I love it.
So Gabor Mate had the hold on to your child. And yes, we want to nurture our kids. That is to make sure they're seen, they're soothed, they're safe, and they're secure. Those are the 4 S's from Dan Siegel. And that creates a healthy attachment. Now, that's when they're dependent. They're going to grow into independence. And it's a natural order of things to be pushed away.
Right.
The thing is for them to for the kids, for whoever's growing, to understand you're safe, soothed, and secure from an internal locus or from an internal place. I call it maternal energy that's nurturing, and then paternal energy that pushes away. However, it's both within every individual.
Sure, yin yang.
Yin and yang, yeah. But while this energy is pushing us away, sometimes we feel as if, again, misunderstanding of, oh, I'm not loved. It's like, no, you're still safe. You're still secure. I'm here for you from a distance. And that tension creates a holistic human being. But it's when it's miscommunicated as to why are you pushing me away or why do you want to leave? Sometimes the parent is misunderstanding that. And that's why we need communication. Yeah. So that's my ideas on because there's still attachment. But attachment theory says, healthy attachment says, I can do it without you, but I choose to do it with you. Like I want to do it with you, but I can be independent. Yeah, those are some of my takes on it.
Yeah,
okay. So,
and it's that push-pull that you're probably working with a lot.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Good.
I'll just, and this comes back to the English teacher. Conflict sometimes defined as just as different. And in that push and pull is where, that's why we have to be intentional and then not mind the conflict, but rather how do we manage the conflict?
Wow. What about, so some of the places, not to presume, though when we don't know something, we can only base it off of some of the things that we do know, right? Or generalize.
Sure. Yeah.
But, some of the places that you named, right, in the Caribbean, South Korea, Saudi Arabia, Alabama, you
Thailand.
could imagine there are parents in those locations that are a little resistant initially towards a lot of the letting go that is critical to this process that you're talking about, right? And well, this is the way that it was done by my parents and by my grandparents, and I turned out okay. So do you get a lot of pushback when you talk to certain groups or certain demographics or in certain cultures? I'm sure there's probably a generational age commonality with people that are a little bit hesitant, but do you get pushback, or what's some of the most common pushback, and then how do you address that and open their minds up to this new innovative strategy?
Sure. It is resistance, because what change is shifting. It is the way in which you have that change be readily accepted is one, to understand what you want on the other side of it. Now, to cultures do things like this. That's collective identity. And when you know that what is important, what is the values of that culture, you can move in tandem with them, somewhat help the movement. And in every culture, if you understand who the audience is, that's this part of communication. If you understand what their wants are, what their desires are, you can move with them or not with them. And there's back in any change. Ask the receiver, what do you want? One thing, really, I'm not against anybody. My approach to living, a philosophy of my own. We'll ask the person, what do you want? And if it's in direction of me, I want your well-being. I want to understand. So I'll always meet whoever's on the other side of this, where they are, where I'm sitting. I know what I know, don't want to know, and I want to explore what I don't. I'm sorry, I get really philosophical real quick, but please let me.
You're
No,
also
that's
with
fine.
the
That's welcomed
philosophical
here.
group. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay, all right. Yeah.
Mind,
So-
body, and spirit. So
Yeah,
all,
for sure.
all parts of the whole where we're looking to explore. Tara, go ahead.
And I'm just kind of back to that know thyself. So, it's sometimes like we're like, oh, I don't understand you. I don't understand you. Could you argue that if you don't understand yourself, it's going to be that much harder to understand the other person or the culture or the state of the world?
Extend that bit further, Tara. When I know my faults that I have, as well as the unseen ability that I have of other people, right? I look at you and I think you are me experience perspective, right? And if I was born into your context, into your place, into your time, I would have made all the same decisions you have. Judgment, and just be curious as to say, what
Pretty
why did you do
profound.
that? And that's why I bring no judgment into exploring other people. I really do understand itself, and it's like, well, why did you do that? And what were you working towards? Okay, this is something that I've learned over here. Maybe I can share this with you. Or what can I learn from this?
Well, that is like a higher level of empathy right there that you just dropped on us. I think that because it's so much easier and I think more common, and I think what separates you is that it's so much easier for someone to pull up to a gas station or something and you see someone in Tesla in a, S-Class in some, fancy European vehicle and think, if that was me, I'd be driving a Civic and I would have, donated my money somewhere else. And it's like, would have you really done that? It's so much easier to say, well, I would have made if that was me, if I was in their shoes, I would have chose this, that, and the other thing. That's just so insightful and such an amazing perspective because putting yourself in someone else's shoes means you have to think about everything else that affected them throughout. So if it was you, maybe you would have done something similar, like you said. And wow, that can really lead to a lot of forgiveness, I think, too, right? When there might be animosity between, different groups of people.
Also to add to that, Brian, I am a practicing stoic. I feel if you're practicing something, you shouldn't have to say it, but I'm saying it for context sake. Because Marcus Aurelius said, do the right thing because it's the right thing to do. When I see somebody, and if I want to hold judgment towards them, oh, why didn't you give away your money? Or why are you doing that? That encourages me to live my best life, for me to be at peace. If I never open my mouth in judgment, well, what am I doing to be my best self? Because I'm only responsible for, I have to be responsible here and in integrity before I judge anybody else.
Yep. And could you also, I like to use the expression because similarly what you said, you are another me. I love that reminder. It's you're another me, and you could take that as empathy or spiritual experience of, like you said, life experiencing itself through all of these avatars. And so can you give people a place to start that maybe aren't there quite yet? And so a practice of that, because it is self-realization, and maybe the mirror is too much, right? Saying, if I'm judging that person, what is it that I'm judging in myself? Maybe they're not at that step quite yet, or seeing, I see me and you. That, where do they start?
So I'm going to take it at a very high level and then bring it very concrete.
Great.
Very high level would be meditation, but loving kindness to those who are close to me, loving kindness to strangers, and loving kindness to those who may hold animosity. However, a very concrete, that's why I work with parents. Your kid. There's no, and the closest identification you have is the little thing that looks like you. That has all your same nuances, that came out of me. That's why being a parent, and I'm looking forward to it, but being a parent, it's another level of understanding there's something separate from you, but very close to you. You have to accept the fact that that's something different, entirely separate, but you see so much of yourself in there. Yes, sorry, Brian.
And that bond is you're touching the tightest bond to your heart, right? Or one of them. Yeah, maybe not the tightest. Sorry, Brian. Go ahead.
No, for sure. Well, yeah, it is the tightest bond. When your partner's in the room, they're the tightest bond. When your kids are in the room, they're the tightest bond.
Just to touch on that, Brian. In Korean, there's what we call then one distance, then two distance, just like how we explain cousins.
Okay.
And the person who you call your life partner,
right,
0 distance. Okay. And then your kids are 1 distance removed.
Gotcha.
Okay, that makes it even playing field.
Yeah. And
that's amazing. Yeah. How much buy-in do you need? So you talked a lot about working with the parents. When are the kids ready to be brought along on this journey and be kind of opened up to the show framework? Is it kind of too much for them as they're developing? Do you like to have them, have input into, what you're working with the parents on? Or is it, parents first, get them on board and then, they'll turnkey it to the kids themselves? How does that process work?
The reason I smiled is, when does a sapling become an oak tree? It is always an oak tree, but it's at this developmental stage. And I think It's all the same principles at an age-appropriate developmental stage.
Okay.
That may not answer your question directly. I feel these principles are always all the same, but you're meeting them what they need at that moment.
So true.
So there's a book called The Breakthrough Years by Ellen Galansky, speaking about preteens and adolescents. It's a wonderful book. I'd recommend it to the listeners if you have teenagers. One of the things she points out is that when describing teenagers, parents often describe their kid as immature. Immature to what? Immature to adults? They're not adults. We don't look at a toddler, an immature child. We don't look at a child and say you're an immature teenager. That we know what at that developed age. So you still have the principles of establishing their identity. You still have the principles of collaborative thinking. The reason I chose this age, though, is because this is the first major transition. When they have all these roles of when they're trying to figure out their own identity. And another approach to parenting that first of all, I respect the wisdom of the parent, right? You start there. But an approach to parenting that I have is autonomy supportive parenting. I'm going to bring you into the conversation more to get more of your ideas. And you're right, Brian, it's different for each child. Every context is different. Working with them one-to-one is just like, okay, yeah, what do you need? What do you want? And what is your situation? There's no meaning without context. But you are giving the reins more to your kids in boundaries.
Love it. How does the autonomy supportive parenting differ than the traditional authoritarian or authoritative methods that, generationally we've become familiar with?
Yeah. So the person who came up with it, I'm drawing a blank on her name right now. She has a wonderful book. It's called Autonomy Supportive. She said it's self-determination theory and practice for kids. And what self-determination theory is I'm going to let you decide what you want. First of all, acknowledging the creator within our kid, like, what do you want? I'm going to support you in that. And now when I say what do you want, it doesn't mean willy-nilly. Because some kids want to eat candy all the time. As the adult in the room, you still have some authority on the final choice, let's say. Yeah, some say. But I want your voice in there because I want you to understand that you are moving towards self-directing. I want you to understand what you want. I want you to notice mastery in that or progress towards it. I'm going to support you in that, and I'm going to help you skills towards that. And the final thing is relatedness or relate people. Other people matter. We are humans. Like, we need connection with other people. Are connecting in those relationships and building that trust. How is it different? I would say it's different by saying, I respect the wisdom that's in you, that's coming forth. And I think it's the journey to your best self. Breath podcast name back in.
Love it.
As an educator, educate means to bring forth. Parenting, actually, the etymology means to bring forth. So you have to believe there's beauty in there, and we create the context for that to flourish.
Awesome. Excellent. Hold on, my wife's texting me, telling me to get you on weekly because all these points she's been trying to tell me for the past 10 years.
Do you do any intensives where you just move right into the house and you're like, what they used to have that nanny show where they're like with the younger kids, you could just come on in and take them for a couple weeks.
I came out of the classroom and said,
That's great. Yeah.
One of the things that...
Oh, sure. No, go on.
I was going to say that one of the overriding themes that is going to be relatable to a lot of people as they process your framework and learn more about it, that I think is so important, is patience. And without having said it, there needs to be a lot of that from the parents' side, I believe. You can correct me if I'm wrong, for this to be successful. So can you talk about the importance of patience, especially as parents transition maybe from a more traditional method of parenting to the show up framework?
That's actually in the literature that this parenting feels more effortful because suffering means pain over time, endurance, and this does take more. Now, how can we be more gracious? By remembering our own upbringing. There's stuff that did. Like what we're doing now is we're laying the foundation. I don't expect us to have it all answered preteen stages, but the reason I work with people at this stage is so that you can start establishing that trust early, before social media gets their hooks in there and while you still have some influence. It does take more patience and marathon sometimes, yet even reflect my own life. There's just some things that I don't understand. I used to hate it when my dad would say, "You'll understand it when you get older," because I felt he was shutting down the conversation. And there have been one or two times when I was older and I was just like, yeah, okay. I don't want to make it sound like suffering, but I mean, it is effortful. Attitude makes it different. And then two, support by other people, shared struggle makes it different. So that's what we need.
Awesome. Tara?
And you can tie in the patience with letting go of control, and if we don't have control of our own life, we might want control of others, and that might be like the children that get that. They're like the age old, like, oh, parents get home, like have a hard day at work and they come home and they're not showing up for their kid, right? And so they're getting that displaced energy. Do you encourage the parents to take on their own personal practice of, loving kindness meditation or exercise or spiritual practice? And have you found like a benefit or correlation between that?
I'll take it a bit further, Tara. I think you're setting me in conscious parenting. This comes from conscious parenting, but the reason we're given kids, the reason I experience right now is so that I might understand myself. It's never the thing, it's how we relate to the thing. And really the work that I do is I'm working with the parent. It's personal development with the thing that's most relevant to them. It's not selfish, but it really is about you and your experience and what is bringing up in you that you start to ask, well, what is this inside me? So I'm helping you put your mask on first. Yeah. And when you start to understand that and you help to start regulate yourself, then you're just like, oh, I can help this little one of me. So you need your personal practice. There's dependence, independence. The final form is interdependence, which is, and Jim Rohn says, I promise to take care of me to be in service to you. If you promise to take care of you to be in service to me.
Wow. I love
Yeah.
that.
So beautiful. Absolutely.
You don't find us speechless often. So, I mean, yeah, that's beautiful.
Yeah, just letting it all sink in, though. And
absolutely.
there are many layers to a lot of what you're sharing here. And I think even for the listener, it's something that you have to try to really think about, because that interdependence, there's multiple parties involved, and each person has their end. So it's not just something we think about, all right, now do 10 push-ups, or like if we're talking about doing something that's very basic and mindless, that's one thing we can just move on from. But these things I like to let sink in a little bit. So, and I also can get the dead air out on the editing side.
So, for
sorry, my point is, I think it's worth noting though that
Mm,
I understand the apprehension of us
mm,
opening up to certain people. And when I say certain people, it's easier for us to open up to people who, this comes especially in America, I think there's
mm,
more. Um, and we do have to walk around with some discernment because sometimes we feel hurt by other people and there's a lack of, so I don't want the audience to think that it's peace, love, and hugs for everyone.
mhm,
However, and this is just my approach to living, I believe the universe has sent us nothing but angels.
mm.
And I have positive intent because I wake up with gratitude, understanding how the universe has poured into me. God, the divine, has poured into me. And that's what encourages me to pour out. But other people don't know that if they don't know me for a long time. And it's meeting the mismatch, like everything doesn't align like this all the time.
Right.
I just want to point that out, right? It is the
Mm-hmm.
rub. It is the misunderstanding. Emerson said to be great is to be misunderstood, but it's holding grace for the other person by making sure I'm doing the right thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, that
So
is you really brought up another, I mean, this is a topic that can clearly be its own episode. How does the phenotype influence the identity, and how do preteens really struggle with that in your experience? I can remember a big deal when Hines Ward, a former NFL player, went to South Korea for the first time. If he had an African American parent, right, and then the South Korean parent, and that was a big deal when he got there. There's obviously the history in the United States, and tribalism has become even more of a focus over the past decade, maybe than it had been in the 90s and the early aughts. Saudi Arabia, you had mentioned going there. There's obviously the natives and then workers that come in and international people there. There's a different vibe and interaction with all different kinds of groups. Obviously, a broad topic. What's the balance between kind of embracing that part of yourself and then also embracing your identity that is kind of above these worldly creations of race, ethnicity, and culture? Yeah, I mean, and we'll just wrap there because you'll have solved like 80% of the world's problems after this answer.
No pressure.
no pressure, no pressure. So I have positive psychology. And in
Right.
positive psychology, there's PERMA. M is meaningfulness or meaning. One definition of meaning is understanding your connection to something greater than yourself.
Okay.
Now, I am a person who believes in greater forces, higher powers, and so on. But I was speaking with my
Mhm.
atheist friend, and I asked him, I said, do you believe there's something greater? And mind you, I'm BYOB, bring your own beliefs. I don't push anything on anybody. But I think there's an
No, no, no.
interesting conversation we had. I said,
Okay.
do you, he said, I don't believe in God. And I said, yeah, no, that's okay. But that wasn't my question. I said, do you
Yeah.
believe in something greater than, bigger than?
Mm.
He said, no, like, what do you mean? And I said, you're Thai, right? I said, you have a family. I see you as an individual and you're part of a bigger family.
Mm.
I said, your family is also part of Thailand, something bigger. And again,
Mm.
identity or culture is collective identity. Now, of course, I'm not going to answer all of the world's problems, but the point I'm making is when we can see how we're connected to a person and something
Mm.
bigger than us towards the well-being of another person,
Mhm.
that's what taps into our humanity, and that's what taps into our bigger potential. I feel we are on an upward spiral. I think consciousness is upwardly spiraling, and I believe we will get there. We are there. The potential is within us, just like the potential is within the seed. We just have to do our best where we are now with what we have in the present.
How can we, you
Whatever
had
that means to
mentioned,
the screen.
sure, absolutely. Real positive. So this is the one guest that believes things are heading in the right direction. So everyone, he's the best. No, it's
I
great,
do.
and you do as well. Sorry, but you're not a guest. I think that having that hope is awesome too. You had mentioned before social media. There's so many social media questions too. Before social media really influences them. So kind of a two-parter. One, can you say that giving them the independence, so the parents, patience, listening, allowing their children to become individuals, does that mean from someone that's listening, oh, just let them kind of do whatever they want. Just let them go, cut them loose. Their favorite YouTubers, whoever they're following on IG, hopefully they'll make the right choices. Have some, their phone goes off at 11, they'll be good to go. Is that what Marcus is saying? Could you clarify that right off the bat?
He's right. No, he's not saying that.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm just trying to play devil's advocate.
No, I know. No,
There are
you're
going
all
to be
good. You're all
people
good.
that are apprehensive,
Yeah.
Because there's sometimes that black or white thinking, right? It's like either all or nothing. And it's like what you're doing to me is like you're finding that common ground. So yeah, we'd love to know how to approach that.
Actually, and that is the tricky thing at this stage. It is a balancing act. Conversation. I would even say read The Anxious Generation by Jonathan Haidt that just came out.
Mm-hmm.
And the whole understanding is when screens came about, to form their identities in virtual spaces. And when I say that, I mean their value systems, what is important. But the question is, when those screens close, who are you? Right? Mind you, kids are a sponge for how the world works when they're exploring their independence. And they are taking YouTubers, actually, the way you get attracted to a channel is by saying you're having a group of friends and you get to hang out with them.
Mm-hmm.
But then you're not really part of the group because what is their purpose behind forming this bond? If they want to sell you merch, or do they really want to improve your well-being? So I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is, let's form an identity in your child while you still can. And when I say form an identity, the S in the show up framework is start with strong identity, which speaks to the virtues and values. And the virtues are the 24 characteristic strengths that come with VIA, virtues in action, from positive psychology. They're with all humans. But what are the unique 5 ones that are with you? And values means what's important. So whenever I interact with you, I'm bringing your awareness to your virtues and values, and I'm celebrating your. Be intentional on what you create, and sometimes that means putting pressure. Sometimes that means backing off.
Awesome. Yeah, the influence is strong. I have an 11-year-old and an 8-year-old. I have many of these. It's a multicultural family. And in a community that is not multicultural, like let's say, so situations will arise where they have to adhere to that identity, knowing yourself. Also, can we talk about what are some things some practical things the parents can do to strengthen the identity of, and I guess it would go back to defining identity. What are we looking to instill values, or are there a set of core beliefs that, all right, this is what you need to go out in the world. Is it all organic depending on the situation? I'm sure there's some commonality with helping to create a strong identity that will not be too fragile as to succumb to those external forces. So can you speak a little bit on that to the parents out there?
And address a question you didn't say, right? And I'm assuming there's a book I just read it, and the name I'm drawing a blank on it, and I'll get it to you for your show notes and afterwards.
Okay.
But it's a book about Black adopted kids or kids of color growing up in white spaces.
Right.
And what conversations do you have with them? And
getting warmer. Yeah, this isn't your first conversation with a parent. He's on to it. It's good.
Before you answer the identity question, and if it's not appropriate, leave it out. The ego, the word ego is thrown around a lot in the spiritual circle of not being good, and to some extent, but with a misunderstanding. But how the identity and the ego are so important in being strong before you even think of getting rid of that ego in your self-actualization journey. So maybe
Mm.
that's a two-parter, or even for, another episode. But if it can be that word ego, if it can be tied into identity.
Okay. Yeah, and then I'm just here a question, but you're saying how identity while
Yeah.
answering this. Mhm.
Because a lot of the times where we're telling people that we're helping out is that ego's too much, right? And you have to move beyond it, or kind of, suppress it a little bit, or that's shouldn't be so much of you, and it's preventing you from getting to a higher level. But maybe it is important as part of the, a puzzle piece of that foundational identity.
Yeah. Okay. Let's work with this puzzle. So the first thing is all growth starts with the truth. And this is how I feel. Again, always be age appropriate, because those questions will arise that I am not like you. However, I feel secure with you. And then we can explain how this family that we've chosen to put together, it was by choice. And we're here for the well-being of each other, right? And that's just true.
Hmm.
One framework that I'm going to in my head, I call SWAN, and that is: you're safe, you're worthy of being, you're able to grow, and your needs will be met as you meet the needs of others. And that's speaking to the child, that's speaking to the person of saying, hey, you're safe, because that's what we're all looking for.
Hmm.
I'll even say it even shorter. As an educator, I know growth is a stress response. And we are able to grow when we know we're safe and we know we're loved. We'll be nurtured, right? And that's the starting place. Now, there will be stressors that will come into your child's life that you cannot buffer them from. You can prepare them for. There's that will blindside even you or them. You can explore to have those conversations with people who've been in your experience or in those communities that you've been before. Be aware of. Recommend the book right after this podcast. However, and I'll say it like this: one parent told me inside a podcast I had earlier this week, I don't want my kid to have a life than me. I want my kid to manage stress better than me. And that's what I think it's about: stress management, because that's where growth is. And oftentimes, Tara, we eschew or we avoid stressors because it is oftentimes hitting our ego. It's hitting to the core of us. However, I think that hitting our identity is testing it. And a fixed mindset, they look the same until they're tested.
That's, I mean, you could say that again. That's so powerful.
Yeah, but you really don't know if a person has a fixed mindset or a growth mindset.
Yep.
And you know what? We have these in different spaces, but you really don't know until it's tested.
Yeah. And that's the conscious mind, right? People can talk the talk, but when their wounds are exposed, it really shows like where they need some support and they need some growth.
I don't. I may have satisfied the question, or I gave
No,
more
for sure.
perspective. More
Yeah.
perspective. Yeah.
Oh, so for our listeners at home, like who feel as though their kids are stuck, in an identity conflict, what are some things that they can encourage, like, maybe encouraging creativity or music or art? Would you suggest tasks like that? And how do they implement that? It's like, oh, you have to explore your creativity 1 hour a day. What are some ways that you can start where they're not like, what?
Yeah. I was sitting with an art teacher what is art, and where he said it's fun. It's an expression of yourself, and I threw in there, it's something you purposely create intentionally, even if it's an audience of one. So I would encourage creativity, because I would say creative in the way the child chooses. Creativity is an expression of what's on the inside, and really an emotionally healthy person. Emotions do 5 things, but one of them is giving a subjective understanding of what this outside world is. and what I'm expecting on the inside. And what creativity does is it puts on the outside what I'm feeling on the inside, as we are the creative. And then when we're their
Right.
audience, we're taking in what other people say.
Yeah.
Expression, impression. And that's why we need art. It's what keeps us human, That's why it's called the humanities.
Yeah. And that's a great point.
mhm.
So art can be cooking, right? Art can be, running around with the dog. Like it doesn't have to actually be, painting, drawing, coloring type act.
Yeah, I'll add on to that. The word trauma for me means unprocessed stress. So it's something that's present, not necessarily in the past. Two people can experience the same thing, but they've not yet processed the story as to why it makes sense. The reason I bring that up is because what art does is it helps you process or make sense of some things as you start to express it and get different opinions and views. I'm not saying that's what art does, but that's why you have art therapy. It helps you make sense of stressful situations.
Tremendous. Back to social media for a second, because you just got me thinking about the the creativity is definitely positive, but creativity online can lead to kind of a disassociation of your identity, because so many people, especially children when they're first getting on, is they're assuming another identity when they're online, and it can get really like deep to the point where they're living more of that identity, and it can be totally different than who their parents are nurturing and who they're nurturing outside of the internet. What are some just recommendations for social media use that is positive, that is more light intended, that has more love? I think back to Google Alphabet's original mission statement, it's known now, was to do everything that we try to do is towards the goal of making the world, a better place or something, right? And, it's debatable whether that's how that's going, but, there was an idea about the internet, really connecting, and it still does to a large extent, connecting people, having
Yeah,
that,
we're here. Yeah, that's right.
right, that's why we're here. I know I'm talking bad about social media, as I'm thinking in my
we
head how
understand.
to
Yeah,
post this to 4 different outlets tomorrow.
Right.
So what are some practices that parents can incorporate to better their children's use of social media? Because stopping it fully probably doesn't mesh with the show up framework, right? So what do you recommend, or can you give us a couple nuggets?
Yeah. When the printing press came out, movable type, they said it was of the devil. Because books and leisure take so much of the kids' time.
Oh God.
Radio came out,
If
so
only we could get them to read.
and then when TV came out, they said you could see
That's
Elvis's
great
hips, and that's
perspective.
really gonna destroy our youth. Um,
Yeah.
what we need to know is that other people matter. So getting them into face-to-face interactions, oxytocin can only be released through physical contact and through contact. So being intentional on creating spaces where we're actually connecting with each other. Yeah, being intentional in how we use social media, right? Nothing's wrong with books. Nothing's wrong with radio. A tool. Being intentional on how you use the tool is where it matters. Now, mind you, the last tool has been engineered by thousands of people inside a room who've been paid dollars, hundreds of thousands of dollars. Even those who created the tool are mindful of how their kids use it. That's another conversation.
For sure.
What we can do on the ground level is by, if it's important to us, letting our kids know why it's important to us and being part of efforts that contribute back to face-to-face interactions in our community. I grew up observing a day where we would not consume media. Rather, it was in which there was intentional bonding with other people as well as the creator. I grew up observing the Sabbath. I think that contributed to my understanding of being part of something bigger, as well as being part of a community that really was looking out for each other.
Absolutely. And that's a great way to accentuate. I mean, one of the things that you're doing so well and that it comes across is how you find the positive in so many things that you study and that you preach, and that's really inspiring. What about um you got me thinking so many different things. This is what I wanted to mention, and edit that brain fart out. Oxytocin. That was
Yeah.
that was another jewel that you dropped on us.
Yes.
Could you tell
Yes.
us about the importance of that hormone and why that face-to-face contact, eye contact, close
Eye contact,
proximity, no
the hug.
screens in between is so critical?
It feels good.
Yeah.
It feels good to feel good.
Yeah.
It's called dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, and endorphins. So let's exercise, let's eat, move, sleep, let's connect as people. And again, not to knock technology, but let's touch Earth also and be intentional in touching Earth because we are human. Yeah, and it feels good to feel good. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And can we have that conversation with our kids in the sense of, like, okay, why do you want to play 2 hours of video game? Well, it's fun. Can you get them to identify what the feeling of fun is versus like, okay, well, when I give you a hug, like that feels good. Like that's a different kind of feel good than fun, right? So is there a way that you can help like open the conversation or just give us some tips on like since you say we say there's an 11-year-old situation and they're like, I'm not gonna talk about this. This is weird. Like your dad, mom, you're being weird. Like why are you asking me about my feelings? The attitude is starting. So like how do you even begin that conversation to get them to identify like what's real to them in their heart and what is not and like notice like this begin almost self-awareness. Is that too soon?
No, it's not. It's not too soon. Introspection actually. What the I don't want to use the E word evil. The insidious thing about technology, it brings our awareness outside of us. It feels so good being outside of us that we don't know how to turn back in.
Yes, yes. As a
Now,
yogi, I know. Sorry,
yeah. As a
constantly like
yogi,
bringing you back in your body, bringing you back. It's a practice, it's a constant practice.
yeah. Um, that's that. I fully agree with some initiatives to not give them till they're 16 or grade 8 or past grade 8. Because I really do think we don't know the full ramifications of it, just like how smoking was advertised by the Flintstones until 40 years later we realize what smoking does to our lungs. Now back to your 11-year-old. I think it's a conversation worth having and a conversation in which to bring them into in with their own rules around it. Maybe as we value connection with each other. And we are going to create ground rules around this, and I want you to actually have some say in these rules. It could mean, and mind you, again, like we said, it's a marathon, not a sprint.
Sure.
Recognizing when you do feel crappy the next morning. Like, I didn't grow up drinking. There was a time I did drink, and then there was a time I realized this doesn't serve me. Help them understand this is not necessarily serving them at a young age. Maybe that's a bit too, but it's a good. Last thing I'll say on this is, and mind you, hold on. When I made that analogy, I wasn't drinking when I was a teenager. Just
No,
sorry.
but the hangover effect you can have from technology, food, substances.
And it was when I brought my awareness back to I don't feel good because of the actions I'm doing. And I think when there's an adult, a person who is caring about your well-being to bring that conversation up, that's what we do as parents, care teachers. The last thing I'll say is, again, write this book down. It's 14 Conversations to Have by 14 by Michelle Ickard. It's a framework for having these conversations. And the framework is brief. BRIEF. B is begin peaceably. So they want to push off every conversation with parents. R is making it relevant. Relevant means, hey, this is what possibly might mean, hey, let's have this conversation in 30 minutes. You're not in trouble or anything, but it's just something that I'm noticing that I talk about. Making it relevant. I is information gathering. You're asking, but again, it's active listening, getting their input first, going back to make sure that they know that you're listening without judgment. And then F is giving feedback. And then deciding on what are we going to do going forward. Now, I can tell you this much, Tara, regardless of what you say, they're going to think you're weird. But
Right.
there are intentional ways to create communication
Sure.
around letting your kid know, I'm doing this for your well-being, and I'm having these conversations for your well-being, and I will give you some leeway, but we're going to meet in the middle. And there's going to be this tension here, but I'm going to be here for you when you lose it.
Yeah.
And sometimes I may lose it, and I'll show you how to repair and reconnect and say, I'm sorry.
Wow,
Awesome.
this is gold magic. Like, we're gonna listen to this. Our listeners will have to listen a few times. This is amazing.
It's tremendous. I do want to, before we let you go, I got to ask this question. And yeah, it might open up, Pandora's box. So my wife is from East Africa, and she is from what I would consider a more traditional, culturally, it's more of a traditional parenting style that we might think about our grandparents going through here. I went to her mom's school when we went to visit in 2011, and it was the first time I had ever really been into a school there. And she wasn't teaching at the time, but her colleague was still working there, and there were like 47, 50 kids in the room, and she wanted us to meet the headmistress and principal, as we would say. So the teacher just left the room with us and my mother-in-law to go see the principal, and the kids were there, and I was like freaking out because I was like, well, they're going to either kill each other or the room or whatever if we can't just step away and walk, the other side of the building. And they're like, oh no, they'll be fine. They've been told not to. And I was like, damn. So it's that easy. Still haven't been able to perfect it in my practice, but there was a different style that I keep telling her, if we just use that way of doing things, like maybe my grandfather did or your parents did, but it's not as forward thinking as the show up framework. And I feel like being the father, a man, not to generalize, as I said earlier, I feel like we're going to give you the most resistance to this, right? We're going to have a more pushback and say, I don't need to listen. I'm bigger than them, right? They're going to do what I have to say. And that's just going to be it, right? And that's the way my dad did it. That's the way my uncle did it. That's the way my grandfather did it. So that's the way I'm going to do it, right? When they're 18 years old, then they can tell me what they want to do, and then they can be independent, right? When they have a job and they're making money and I'm not paying for everything, then they can let me know. Whereas I think women can be more open-minded in this area and more progressive and more open to different strategies that you and more well-rounded approaches. So is that true? Hopefully it is, because I just spent a lot of time kind of trying to validate it and defend it. Is it true that the fathers and dads out there are giving you our time? And if so, what's something that you can say to them right now to open their mind, to tell them, give this a shot? I've seen the results and it will work. What can we tell them? What can we impress upon them to take this step?
Okay, so I'm going to repeat it back just to make sure I understand.
Sure. Yeah. To show up and not to do it the old school way. I feel like the dads just want to do it the way, I'm going to yell, I'm going to come in, I'm going to tell you what to do, shut it down, or I'm taking it away, or I'm not paying your phone bill, or whatever. And they're not going to be as open-minded maybe to autonomy or listening or have the patience. And I am totally generalizing, right? But I think that is possible. And just anecdotally in my experience.
Feedback. Yeah. But and it's kind of like a part
I got
two
the
of that.
menu.
I think it at the age of like redefining the masculine and the feminine and the patriarch, and like a lot of
Mm,
this can be like archetypal, like as we shift, right? And so to Brian's, like, how can we help our male listeners, the masculine energies, like step into their feminine?
yeah. Say masculine energies. A few things on this topic. So I just had read a lot of books. I just read a book called The
Without
Magic of
losing their
Caring.
egos. We don't want them to
Or I mean, do
totally
it.
lose their masculine energies.
Yeah,
We don't
yeah,
want
no,
them to dispel all
and
their
I do.
masculine energies.
So yeah, do correct me if you prefer, yin yang for fluid,
Oh,
what or better
no.
terms.
I'll use words don't have meaning. People have meanings for words, and I'll
Okay.
try to explain it so that we both understand each other, right? Um, from our own lived experience now, we know that there's an epidemic of loneliness in males. That's been reported. And I think that's because traditionally, nurturing was not a part of masculinity. Whereas I think nurturing is a part of masculinity because nurturing is a part of humanity. That's the first idea. Now, we may not nurture each other yet. To make sure that we're seen, safe, secure, and soothed, we oftentimes do that through activities. Thing together. We go out and we play ball together. We do activities together. And in those activities, communication may arise and may start. However, oftentimes males feel as if they're exploring their emotions is a burden on the other person. And like we're not expected to be a burden on another person. So we bottle that up and push it down until it like a pressure cooker blows up. So their approaches to deal with males differently than females. Girls at this age are oftentimes it's their reputation that's the currency, their social currency there. So that's a whole different different can of worms. Now, three things. One thing, but 3 points. If we're falling short of expectations, it's one of three things. It's either one, we don't have the skills, or two, we don't feel the effort to gain skills. The third point is you don't care. If you want to raise a kid who is confident in themselves, is going to be a contributor to society, can deal with stressors in life. You want to teach them to be a holistic person. So you want to nurture them and you want them to form their identity. That's a skill. Parenting is a skill. Parenting means to bring forth, like we said. If you don't feel supported in that skill, find a men's group, find this podcast, find friends. We weren't meant to parent alone. It's called allo parenting. If you're listening to this conversation up until this point, I assume you care. If you care about it, find support or make an effort to learn that skill.
Awesome. And
That's
that's
beautiful advice.
really great advice and advice that is applicable, tangible advice and stuff that, people can do, apply to their lives right away. Great stuff. Tara, I usually have my closing question as to, what was the most recent book that but you provided so many
You
books
did.
throughout. You're on top of
I'm still gonna ask.
the Jonathan Haidt stuff with social media and teens and how it's a generation iPhone, a lot of the stuff that he's been tracking and how that's changed over the year. I guess one thing that I would end with, have you seen a noticeable difference since you started until now, based on the prevalence of smartphones and social media in the preteens and in the challenges that you face, or it's still the same old things, just with a different kind of, it's the radio, it's the phonograph, it's the TV, now it's a smartphone, social media, or do you actually see a notable difference in moving into the...
Sorry, the reason I'll tell you why I'm laughing. Well, first of all, I've only been a communication coach for about, I would say seriously 3 months, right? The
Okay.
reason I'm laughing is because I'm not that old to be around when the phonograph was around.
No. I know what you mean, but they
but
always
But
had
you're
preteen issues then.
I'll let Jonathan Haidt's book stand on its own, in
Okay.
that it lays out the argument that when we started
Mm.
getting screens,
Right.
that's when we not be able to look inward. So I think it's
Mm.
different from radio, different from TV. TV is a screen, but that's
Mm-hmm.
it's such an exaggerated form of dissociation because you can so easily like get pulled into it. I am gonna ask one more question for those listeners that maybe don't have children yet, and they're overwhelmed and like, oh well, maybe I don't even want to have children because of the state of the world, and it's so I don't love the word hard. It's so hard, you know. What do you tell them, and how can you bring forth? I'm assuming it's going to be a positive, encouraging answer to those people that are unsure because of all of the adversity that they potentially do face, the children and the parents.
I hear you say it's going to be optimistic. I'll say this. What do you want? I respect your wisdom. And if they do not want to have kids, I'm of the mind, what do you want? I trust your wisdom that if for you to craft the life that you want. Now, that said, if you don't have kids, you're still part of the still parents who do have kids, or to your nieces, your nephews, you're a part of this community together. Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome.
And to our listeners that don't have children of their own per se, they can still get so much wisdom out of this episode and apply what you have given us to their own relationships, to their own inner child, to their potential future relationships with children and younger people. So we are so grateful for everything that you've shared and all of this wisdom. And I can't wait to go back and listen and take notes.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you again. Marcus Aurelius Higgs, Show Up Framework. Where can, we'll link to everything in the show notes, but where can people find you, find your work, learn more about all the great information that you've been providing today?
Put out more information. As I said, it just started 3 months ago, but they can find me on LinkedIn.
Okay.
I'm always accessible there. And I am on other social media, but you won't find me there so much. MarcusHiggs.com, and I'll have some work coming out in soon time.
Can't
awesome.
wait. I can't wait.
Thank you. It was really a pleasure meeting you.
Absolutely.
Brimming with newfound knowledge. I can't contain it. It was insightful. We learned a lot. Teaching is learning. That was excellent and so true. Please stay in touch. We'd love to reconnect with you again.